Welcome to another episode of Mr. Plumb's Thoughts. I wanted to make this video because I came across a video earlier today from Dan McClellan, if you guys know who that is, and it made me blink twice. So Dan McClellan is a Latter-day Saint with a PhD in theology, and he starts his video by saying that there's no such thing as a demon in the Hebrew Bible. And my brain just went, wait, what? I mean, that's a pretty bold claim, coming from someone who allegedly knows the text in Hebrew. But I guess, to be fair, before we roast it, because what he meant to say, or what he's trying to say, is that the specific Greek philosophical idea of a daemon, or an immaterial spirit that can possess or inspire people, that idea didn't exist yet, or that word didn't exist yet in Israelite vocabulary. Okay, fine, sure. Well, I think we can agree that the word itself didn't exist, but the jump from that technical nuance to there's no demons in the Old Testament is like saying that there's no humans in Genesis because the word anthropos hadn't been invented yet. It's just kind of an absurd line of thinking. But here's the thing: languages evolve, but realities don't. The spiritual world didn't just materialize in the Greek age. People had been describing and naming it for thousands of years. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and the Ugaritic Canaanites all used early and almost identical terms for unseen intelligences. And some were helpful and some were hostile. In Ugaritic texts, for example, the word sadhu or sed can refer to a protective or a destructive spirit, depending on its context or how it's used. That same word family becomes shedim in Hebrew. So linguistically and historically, this isn't a borrowed idea. It's a shared spiritual vocabulary that every culture in the Near East recognized. Israel didn't copy it. They corrected it. They said, yes, these spirits exist, but they don't serve God. They have rebelled and against that true God, and they serve another master now. In the Old Testament, the word demon is translated from the Hebrew shedim, and we've got two instances where this is used. One is Deuteronomy 32:17 that says they sacrificed unto devils, not to God. And Psalm 106:37 repeats it and says they sacrifice their sons and their daughters unto devils. That's not metaphor. Those shedim come straight from the Akkadian Sedu, or spirit beings that could bless or curse. In other words, the Israelites were already talking about spiritual intelligences and recognized that some were hostile. That's exactly what later languages would call daemons, or in plain English, demons. And there's another word that we find in the Bible called seirim. Leviticus 17:7 warns they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils. But here, the word devils actually translates as seirim, which is literally hairy ones, or goat spirits. It's the same class of beings that would later be worshipped as Pan or Azazel. Azazel from the Book of Enoch, if you read that. Leviticus 16 even sends the scapegoat to Azazel himself in the wilderness, not to some random spot, but the same watcher that First Enoch chapter 10 chains in the desert pit Dudael for giving mankind forbidden knowledge. You tell me that's not demonic. That seems pretty demonic to me. And then there's Isaiah 34:14, which talks about Lilith. Most English Bibles hide the word behind screech owl or various other terms, related terms. But the Hebrew word is Lilith. The same Babylonian tablets use for a night demon that preys on travelers and infants. And that's centuries before the Greeks ever philosophized about spirits. And the ancient world feared her for good reason. Babylonian amulets from I would say as early as 2000 BC or show mothers praying to ward off Lilitu, a nocturnal spirit that was blamed for infant mortality and sickness. Isaiah's audience would have understood this immediately. The prophet was describing a desolate land so cursed that even Lilith would find a home there. It's not a poetic filler. It's a direct allusion to a being that everyone in the world already knew and accepted was demonic. So when Dan says Shedem simply means a class of deity, he's technically right. I won't argue with the technicality there. If by deity you mean a spirit being that was worshipped by pagans. But when the psalmist says people sacrifice their children to those beings, that's not a neutral other god. That's the biblical definition of evil spiritual power. And history matters too. Israel was surrounded by Mesopotamia, Canaan, and Egypt, and every one of them had elaborate taxonomies of spirits that caused disease and madness and drought and infertility, you name it, right? All of these bad things were attributed to demons. Think of it this way. In Mesopotamia, they feared the Ituku and Rabasu spirits that brought plagues. In Egypt, they had the Akemu Sek, the restless dead who haunted tombs. In Canaan, you had the Rephaim, or ancestral spirits of the underworld, that were invoked in rituals that the prophets condemned. Every one of these was part of the same ecosystem of belief. The Hebrews weren't naive to it. They simply refused to worship them, as others did. Their writings don't sanitize the unseen world. They contextualize it under the authority of God. You don't just erase that shared worldview from the text. When the Hebrew writers talk about evil spirits from the Lord tormenting Saul in 1 Samuel 16:14, or say the haunting places of desolation, they're speaking the same spiritual language as their neighbors, only filtered through covenant theology, saying, yes, these spirits exist, but Yahweh alone has power over them. That's why Moses forbade necromancy and mediums and divination in Deuteronomy 18:10-12. If there were no demons, then these prohibitions make zero sense, right? Now, what changes in the Greek period isn't the reality. It's just simply the label. The Greeks didn't invent the unseen world. They relabeled it. By the time Alexander's empire spread Hellenistic language across the Near East, Jewish scribes had to translate their scriptures into Greek. The Septuagint translators reached for the term daimonion because it already captured what Hebrew writers meant by shedim, or unseen spirits. Not human, not divine, often hostile. So rather than borrowing a foreign concept, they were simply using the vocabulary of the day to describe a truth that was already ancient. By the time of First Enoch, the Tobit and the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Hebrew Shedem had merged conceptually with the Watcher's offspring, those disembodied spirits that wander the earth. When Jews began writing in Greek, they reached for the nearest word, daimonion. Same beings, but a new spelling. So yeah, the word demon is Greek, but the beings are far older. And why does it matter? I would say modern academics like to fence off religious development into tidy chronological boxes, saying things like this idea didn't exist until the Greeks or other nonsense. But Scripture isn't a museum exhibit. It's a continuation of human experience with the unseen. The Hebrews didn't need Plato to tell them that evil spirits existed. They'd been fighting them ever since Egypt. So they knew very well what they were. So to claim no demons in the Old Testament, it is technically clever, but contextually absurd. It's like saying there's no electricity in Genesis because they hadn't invented the word voltage. The phenomenon was obviously there, only vocabulary later evolved. So I'd say here's the takeaway. Proper interpretation requires more than just a degree in theology. It also requires historical literacy, the ability to step into the ancient worldview, into their shoes, instead of flattening it with modern categories and modern interpretations. Once you do that, the Old Testament reads exactly as it always has. A world alive with spiritual forces, angels and watchers and tempters and even demons, all operating under God's sovereignty, exercising their agency that God allows them to exercise. So, next time someone with letters after their name says something like there are no demons in the Old Testament, just smile and say, well, only if you've translated the Hebrew into modern unbelief. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the matter. Thank you guys for watching. I've gotten some good ideas for some more videos already that I'm working on, doing some research and gathering the information for. But if there's anything that you want me to research, obviously drop it in my comments. And thank God for these understandings. I don't know what goes wrong with people when they end up getting a PhD, but I feel like that's the number one thing that just breaks people's brains is getting them a PhD. It's really weird. But I definitely thank God for helping me understand these things, and also thank God for motivating me to not pursue a PhD, because I definitely saw the corruption in there and didn't want to have anything to do with it. So yeah, thank you guys all for watching, and I hope this helps you understand that there are demons in the Old Testament, and the context makes it very clear. And I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.